This is the moment we've all been waiting for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world. Let's get ready to
Welcome to the Junkyard Pod. Today we are rounding out our NBA draft coverage with a very exciting episode where we will be ranking about 20 different prospects for the Cleveland Cavaliers to consider. Joining me to do so is James of the Everything Cavaliers Twitter page. James, thanks again for joining the show. And hey, the draft is only 2 days away. How are you feeling?
Tony, thank you again for having me on so soon. It's an honor. I'm so excited for this draft to happen just because we have no idea how the top is going to unfold. I just need it to happen already. I've been in this world for 2.5 months now. I'm ready for it to be over.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And I've never been like a huge NBA draft guy. I tend not to watch much college basketball or anything like that. But whenever the Cavs do have a pick, even if it's 20th in the draft, I always get excited when I start diving into the prospects, looking at the mock drafts, the big boards, just the unpredictability, especially this year where no one seems to know how it's going to shake out. I think it's so fun to find out. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Me too.
And to break down how our episode today is going to work, so we each picked from about 20 potential prospects. I know you had a couple of guys on your list that I didn't include just because I'm not too familiar with them, but we'll get into the specifics to kind of explain this episode for anyone watching on YouTube. We have 5 categories to choose from. At the top, the S tier, which is the best available prospects. Our next tier was called Swinging for Upside. That's the prospects who we believe are a bit of a gamble, but bring a ton of potential. After that, we have the low risk tier for prospects who are probably a little safer, but come with a lower potential ceiling. You can think of someone like Tristan da Silva as an example of that. After that tier, we have Worth a Shot, which feels self-explanatory. These are the guys who we're not super high on as prospects, but hey, they're worth considering. And then the last tier is I'll Pass, which again, pretty self-explanatory. And like I said, we each have our own tier list. In a moment, I'll put them on screen for you to see. And what we'll do is we'll break down each of my rankings and then compare and contrast where I stand with how James ordered his prospects. And finally, I'll put them on the screen now. Corey, my co-host, was not able to join us today, but he did create a tier list of his own, which we will share. It's unfortunate that he's not here because his turned out very different than ours, as you can see as I'm putting them on screen. So I wish he was here to explain a little bit, but I'm sure next time Corey's available, we will get his opinion on all of this, and it should all be on Twitter too. So this was how Corey's ranking panned out. A little higher on Salon. How do you pronounce his name? I hear people say it differently every time.
I think it's Salon, but I don't have a super clear understanding of it either. I think everyone's kind of up in the air about it.
Yeah, I try and figure it out, but every video I watch, someone's pronouncing it differently. So we'll say Salon. If that's incorrect, we apologize. Corey's a bit higher on him than I believe either one of us was. And yeah, there's some differences here. Kevin McCullough, Swinging for Upside, is one that I definitely disagreed with, but we'll get into that, I'm sure. Again, Corey, wish you were here so we could get into this. But looking at our 2 lists, is there anything right away that jumps out to you as you want to discuss this first?
I'd say the first thing, and I think you know where I'm going with this, is why Kyle Filipowski is in your Worth a Shot tier and maybe
Yep,
not a little bit higher. So I would just want to hear from you on that part.
Yeah, I figured that this would be where we would start. Let me scroll here. I have my notes. Okay, so I have him in my Worth a Shot tier, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Of that group, I'm probably highest on Filipowski. I think you could convince me to move him all the way up into the second tier, maybe even the S tier, because he genuinely is one of my favorite prospects for the Cavs. His shooting, the size, the ability to dribble the ball and create plays is something that I value a lot. So I don't want to come across like I'm low on him just because he's in this tier. I would definitely jump at giving him an opportunity, especially staggering his minutes alongside the 2 bigs. I think he's a good fit there. My main concern and why I ended up moving him down the list, I worry a little bit about his athleticism. at least more than some of the guys I had ahead of him. I don't know how effective his ball handling and playmaking will be if he can't handle the speed of the NBA. And a lot is riding on his ability to space the floor. And while I believe in his jump shot, I don't have absolute faith, if that makes sense. So that's why I wound up having him a little lower than I expected when I first started looking at prospects.
Okay, that I understand all of the concerns, especially the athleticism and defensive concerns, because a more ground-bound, negative wingspan big doesn't scream defense to anybody. But I think because we have Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley, that's what makes the fit so good here, in my opinion, because they can cover up on the backside, I think, for some of his deficiencies where I think he could handle more. He'll guard other bigs and they can help come over and kind of clean up at the glass a little more. I don't think he's not a good defender by any means, but I think he's better than given credit for because he's in the right place a lot of times. It's just he can't impact the ball as much as you'd like out of your big. And on offense, I think the fit is awesome, especially because he would just replace George Niang's everything about him in the rotation right away. He's better at pretty much everything besides the three-point numbers, which I buy for Filipowski. He jumped to almost 35% this year. Not super high volume, but I buy the mechanics and the touch for him to be able to step out and shoot kind of in that 36-37% range, which isn't where Niang has been for his career. You know, he's been hovering around that 40-41%. But I buy the dribbling and the passing on the move for Filipowski so much that I think he could play the four in some lineups. And if you pair him and Mobley, two bigs that can, in theory, dribble and pass, it can give the Cavs a whole new look that we really haven't seen to this point.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you don't have to convince me that we can upgrade at the George Niang position. I'd sign up for this in a heartbeat. And yeah, I do think his mechanics, his form, his jumper, I believe in it. The main reason that concerns me a little bit is just that I think he has more riding on his jump shot than somebody like Deron Holmes, who I have in my S tier, where even if Holmes doesn't pan out as a shooter, I still think I believe in his playmaking and his versatility a little more. And you know what, before we officially get into today's episode, I want to say three quick things. One, if you enjoy this content and you aren't subscribed, please consider doing so and drop a like while you're at it. Those two things really help the channel, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And secondly, why I transitioned into this is because, you know, I want to be very clear. I'm not an NBA draft expert. It's why I brought James on the show to begin with. So at least someone here knows what they're talking about. And also, thirdly, first, you know, go support James as well as other draft content creators who I will have plugged on the screen right now on YouTube in the editing process. I'll put a couple guys up there who these channels do great work. They're largely responsible for helping me form my opinion on these prospects. So please go support them as well. And now that that's out of the way, and we can reopen the Cal Filipowski discussion as we move along, but I want to start here. We're going to go through my tiers, starting in the S tier. Now, I only had one guy up there, and it is Deron Holmes, a guy who I've fallen in love with recently. I believe the Cavs, speaking of Filipowski as well, another thing that I meant to say, the Cavs are able to cover up any potential limitations he has defensively. The bigs really help him in that department. And I think it's similar for Deron Holmes in Cleveland. I think they would be able to maximize his potential, being a big who, if all goes well, he can appropriately defend multiple positions, protect the rim, set screens, operate dribble handoffs, push in transition, spread the defense with his shooting to a degree, and serve as a lob threat. Now, that's the dream scenario. The question is, how good will he be at any of those particular skills? That's what makes or breaks him as a prospect. If he ends up being just okay at all of those things, then that's a big concern. But with a skill tree that's that diverse, if Holmes can polish his game, even if it's just a few of those areas, this could be a home run pick because I think it matches so well with either Allen or Mobley. And so that's why I'm so high on Holmes as a prospect. And you also had him in your S tier. So tell me a little bit about Deron Holmes.
So I do agree that of all of the prospects that we talked about, he is in the S tier as well. Even though I'm a little wary on the versatility stuff translating on offense, just because he is more of a tweener, a term that we don't see as much anymore. You know, they use unicorn and stuff like that, but with his build and the improving touch, I would say, other than his effort and motor, there isn't another skill, in my opinion, that really gets him on the floor and keeps him there. So the development of his offensive game is really important for me. He's a really hard worker. We could see that in the jump and 3-point percentage attempts and his free throw percentage in his junior season last year. But it has to come together, because if he doesn't shoot, then him playing with Mobley or Allen just really becomes sticky for me. I don't buy him off the bounce as much as I buy Filipowski, or the natural touch either. So if I had to rank them, I put Filipowski just a touch higher than Holmes because I buy the offensive fit a little more. But imagine having Deron Holmes, having a lineup with Isaac Okoro, Dean Wade, Deron Holmes, and either Evan Mobley or Jarrett Allen. I don't know how you score on that team. So it's just, can the offense translate enough to warrant him playing with one of the other bigs? That's my biggest question.
Yeah, and I agree. I do see all those concerns. Again, that this is a phrase that gets tossed around a lot, but it is true. You don't want a jack of all trades, master of none. That's someone who Deron Holmes could fill that archetype at his worst. And also I should have mentioned this at the top, and I think this is true for both of our tiers. It's ranked in tiers, but we don't have them in any specific order inside of these tiers. Like you said, you would have Filipowski ahead of Holmes. Just want to clarify for anyone watching that Deron Holmes is number one in the way that it's written, but it's kind of interchangeable once we get to there. And so moving along here, going back to my tiers, in the swinging for upside category, who you could argue Deron Holmes is maybe even in that tier as well. In fact, let me see. I believe Corey, sorry, I'm kind of juggling things around. Corey had Deron Holmes in his swinging for upside tier, and I could hear a case for that because, again, I think he's a little bit riskier of a prospect, and I probably made him sound when I was gloating about him. But someone who absolutely fills that category for me is Bob Carrington. Elite shot creator. I think he's going to hunt his own shots and create off the dribble throughout an NBA career. There's a big gap that the Cavs have to fill in their supporting cast, and I think Bub could be a project who pays dividends in that category. But of course, there's a risk there, because if he doesn't manage to score at an NBA level, he doesn't bring that much else to the table. At least defensively, he's not a great prospect. Offensively, he does have I believe in his handle. I think he has potential as a playmaker, but there is a path where this doesn't pan out for him. But I do believe in him, and I think if you're going to take a swing, he's a prospect who I'm very comfortable doing that with.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows how much I like Bob Carrington in this draft. I buy pretty much everything translating, even though he shot the same percentage at the rim that he did on pull-up jumpers this year, both at 50.9%. I think that's a product of him being a late growth guy, where he was 6 foot tall until about 18 months ago, I think. So he's learning how to be 6'5" on the court. He's learning how to use the different angles he has access to now, which it takes some time to adjust to that. So I buy pretty much everything on offense he could, especially being a third guard next to Garland or Mitchell. I think he could play on or off the ball. The off the ball stuff this past year was a little tricky because the catch and shoot numbers weren't very good, but that's a rhythm thing. You have to become more comfortable without the ball. And I think that's something, he's working on this entire pre-draft process. And again, he's 18 years old. His rookie season, he'll be 19 the entire time. So I'm not concerned about that improving because his touch is so good on pull-ups. I assume the fluidity and touch will translate into catch and shoot as well. And I buy the on-ball defense for him guarding guards, because I think his foot speed is really good. His ability to avoid screens is insane for an 18-year-old that just grew 4 or 5 inches, a year ago. And he can flip his hips super quick to me. I buy the on-ball defense, not really an event defender, and that's why he gets knocked a lot. The steal and block rate were really low, And off the ball, he's just not super impactful because he's not generating that chaos. But I think his ability to stick with guys and kind of navigate traffic, that's underrated as well. And I just buy everything about Bub for the most part. So I think he's going to be a steal whoever gets him. And I really don't think the Cavs are going to have the opportunity to draft him.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. And I agree. I think that I would be surprised if he's there at 20. I'd be pleasantly surprised. As far as the defense goes, that's why you're on the show, to bring a little more insight, because I just, from what I've heard, he's not a great defensive prospect, but it's probably because he's not an event defender. You don't see those big plays as often. And hey, like we said with Filipowski, the Cavs are a team, they can hide for defenders, even if that's what Bub ends up being, especially because he's young. I think the Cavs will have no problem hiding him. You have to be a George Niang level defender to stand out on this team. So as long as he can avoid being that, I'm sure they'll be able to make it work. The fact that he is so young, he's a project. That's where we get into the swinging for upside category. So that's why I put him there, but I totally understand why you would have him in the S tier, because I'm right there with you. I believe in him as an NBA player. The pull-up jumper is just undeniable. It's absolutely why you buy into him as a prospect.
I want to ask about why Tyler Smith being in the swing for upside. I want to hear your sell on Tyler Smith.
Okay, well, here we go. This is where I was going next. Anyways,
Perfect.
this is my big upside swing. If I had to pick a prospect who people are a little mixed on, who I just seem to really, really believe in, it's Tyler Smith. I think he just has so much raw potential as a pick and pop threat, as a guy who can space the floor at that power forward position, but his athleticism sets him aside from some other traditional stretch fours. I think he has the tools to be a massively impactful modern NBA power forward. The G League Ignite were such a mess that it's hard to really analyze his flaws and get a good sense of it. So that's why I believe in his upside a little more. I think if you put him in a winning position, you make him the power forward next to an Evan Mobley or Jarrett Allen, you can probably get the most out of his athleticism. Whether or not, the thing that concerns me is his feel for the game. That's my biggest gripe, is I'm just not sure how well he sees the game. Again, playing with the Ignite makes it a little difficult probably, but at his best, I can see him spacing the floor, pick and pop, even being a threat to roll to the rim. That athleticism paired with the shooting is what gets me so excited about Smith.
Yeah, I totally get it. I do like Tyler Smith. I do have him a little lower in the worth a shot tier, I believe, just because his upside is stuff he already kind of does, and it's not really on-ball stuff, right? So it's a lot of spot ups or pick and pop jumpers. I don't really believe in his ability to handle the ball at all. I just didn't see it. And when I saw him rip downhill and go to the rim, he's really upright and stiff to me. The driving angles aren't great, and I don't think he utilizes his frame and his athleticism in that way. Can that be learned? Sure. I just had a tough time seeing it because I don't know if he can be bendy and bursty enough to get by that guy. Even if a guy jumps and flies by, I'm sure. But if he closes out short, I don't know if it's there. But if he shoots 41% from three, that's not really going to matter, right? And, as a lob threat, he can get on the rim, pretty springy athlete. The defense is really what concerns me. And before I did my dive into Tyler Smith, I had seen the whole, he's terrible on defense, like some of the worst tape I've ever seen. I'm like, it can't be that bad, right? I don't think it was some of the worst defense I've ever seen, but it really was not very good. Again, he's upright to me. I think his hips are really stiff, so he doesn't slide very well, and his problem solving for when he closes out, guys rip by, he fully opens like a swinging door and tries to beat the shot off the glass instead of taking a better angle to cut the guy off, maybe at the free throw line or a step in. He's trying to meet him at the rim and spike it off the glass. So I think he's been able to do that at previous levels, being a great athlete. He was a top 5 recruit in his high school class, I believe. So old habits die hard, and hopefully as he gets in the NBA and into a system, he can work on that, maybe get more flexible hips, move the feet a little bit better. But I just struggled to see it. And he played a lot of 5 for the Ignite, and that's not his position at all.
Mhm.
So that's also a way I'm having trouble conceptualizing him at the 4 in the NBA, because the 4s can really handle. They're really 3s, 5
Yeah.
years ago. But
Mm.
if he has slow feet guarding 4s and 5s in the G League, what is he going to do when Jason Tatum's out there or Giannis is out there and he gets caught in a switch or has to X out or something? So I'm
Mhm.
just skeptical of the foot speed and the hip mobility for him to be able to actually defend.
Yeah, and I agree with that for sure. There's definitely big concerns in his game. And of course, that jump shot, if it doesn't pan out to be, and if he doesn't become an elite shooter, honestly, then the rest of his game becomes harder to justify. And again, the thing that concerned me, along with the defense, is just I'm not sure what his feel for the game is. His instincts, they're very questionable to me, so that's a big concern. But hey, sometimes you gotta just swing for upside. You got to get bold here. The other person who I had in my swinging for upside tier is Cody Williams. Now, him and Dalton Connect are in parentheses because they're potential trade up candidates. And so, as far as Williams goes, I'm not the biggest fan. I think he's highly touted as a prospect just because of how much potential he has, because of his frame, 6'10", athletic, versatile player, some real mobility. It makes him too interesting to ignore. I don't necessarily have much faith in him putting it all together, but if the Cavs, they have better intel than I do, if they're working out and they see that if they just fall in love with him as a prospect, is what I'm trying to say, I could see justifying this decision. But again, I'm not the biggest fan of Cody Williams. Where do you stand on him?
I do like Cody Williams. I wouldn't trade the farm for him though, just because we saw such a small sample from him, especially pre-injury. He was really good pre-injury. If he kept that up, I have a feeling he would be in the mix for the number 1 pick.
Mm,
But he had a facial fracture. I think he had an ankle injury too. So he really
mm,
struggled from, I'd say, January on, just with depth perception on the court. And he's more of a slasher at this moment. So just jumping off one or just around bodies and traffic in general, it's mentally taxing when you don't fully
yeah.
trust your body. I do like the touch around the rim, though. I think he finished around high 60s percentage wise around the rim. So for a guy that's about 170 pounds, it's pretty dang impressive. So as he continues to put on weight and hopefully the jump shot comes along, percentage was good, but super low volume. That'll make him very dynamic on offense. And defense, I don't really know. I think he was fine. He has the tools for sure. I just need to see it more against NBA level guys. Again, he's so skinny. The couple injuries kind of worry me. Um, and I could see the Cavs really liking him because they didn't get their Williams fix 2 years ago. I could see them convincing themselves this time around and just trying to buy low if Cody Williams ends up falling a little bit.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, if he falls somehow, I'd take him immediately,
Mm-hmm.
because I do see the intrigue of him as a prospect. I mean, when you get guys of that size and that mobility with all the touch, it's hard to ignore. So I absolutely see the case for him there. Moving into our next tier now, the low risk tier, and I feel like the person who really just defines that is probably Tristan da Silva. Uh, I've wavered back and forth on him as a prospect, but he just has a skill set that so obviously translates to what the Cavs are missing. I worry about his ceiling and his floor not really being all that great. Well, he has a strong floor. That's what makes him a good prospect for this. He seems like a low risk pick, but if his scoring doesn't immediately translate, then it kind of hurts his stock. It hurts his value to the Cavs. You kind of have to hope that that's going to be something that he can bring right away. That's the selling point for me, at least with the Silva, is that he's going to be able to come in and help much faster than some of the other prospects. And so I'm not sure how much better he can get as an older prospect, but if you want a low risk pick, and if he's available, because it seems like he might not even be available by the time 20 comes up, I think it's a good pick for the Cavs.
I agree. I also don't think he's going to be there at this point. Um, just because, 6'8", 6'9" wing, shot near 40% the last 2 years at Colorado. I could really see, Philly, LA, or even Miami thinking about him fitting right in right away and wanting a piece that's ready to go. We're trying to push in the playoffs and really figure it out. I also have been going back and forth with De Silva. I can't tell if it's paralysis by analysis and I've been overthinking this too much because the stats are there. He put up pretty much the same stats for 2 years in a row at Colorado, like 16 points a game, 40% from three, 6'8" with I think is like a 6'10" wingspan, and just dribble, pass, shoot, wing, knows how to play the game, impactful off-ball defender. Yet I'm sitting here thinking, well, if he doesn't, he's 23 already. If he doesn't shoot 39% off the gate, if it's like 36, how valuable is he? Because he's pretty physically mature at 23, but he's still pretty skinny and struggled with that in the Pac-12 as a senior. I keep saying he looks like a cross-country runner that just happened to be good at basketball. And I can't get that out of my head. I do worry about him in high leverage settings because I don't buy the on-ball defense high enough. And because he's 23, he just doesn't have that runway if the shot isn't falling. So are you going to take that risk? But if you pass on him and he's so obviously just good right out of the gate, you feel stupid. So that's the tug of war that's been going on in my brain for about 10 weeks now.
Yeah, and that's basically how I feel too, is like you see how good he is at scoring, and it's an easy buy-in for the Cavs, who basically need exactly what he provides. But as an older prospect, as a guy who might have a lower ceiling, if that doesn't translate, you're kind of cooked. It's like, what else does he really fall back on? And because, again, he's an older prospect, compare him to Bub Carrington, for example. If Bub doesn't come out the gates firing, you say to yourself, okay, well, he's not even 19 yet. We can take some time to develop him. If De Silva comes out and he's struggling, it's a lot harder to justify that pick, and it just feels worse, if that makes sense. And a guy who I would kind of put in the same category here, and we both have him in our low-risk tier, is Jalen Tyson. I'd like to hear what you think about him as a prospect, because I share many of the same feelings as De Silva.
Yeah, I also have kind of a hard time with Tyson too because of the scaling down factor. He had such a high usage at Cal this past year. The defense was not good. He was getting clipped on screens left and right. The effort and attentiveness wasn't where it needed to be. But again, he was their whole offense. I think that was the least enjoyable team I watched this draft cycle. There was nothing redeeming about the guys he was playing around. So I give him kind of a pass there because the previous year at Texas Tech, he shot 40% from three on lower volume, and the defense was a lot better. So I just don't know how it necessarily scales down because it's not the thing we've seen most recently from him. But again, 6'7" in shoes, strong, kind of stocky, can score at three levels and really play make, I think, on the second side. It's does the defense come around, and can you cut out like 15 to 20% of the bad dribble jumpers he took and just make those easy catch and shoot threes? If he's the clearest Levert replacement to me, if he's good, because it's similar size profile, and I think the skill sets are similar there as well. As long as Tyson doesn't shoot 5% on short pull-up twos, I think he'll be okay.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. And, just to throw this out there too, Cavs today announced that they're hiring Kenny Atkinson as their coach, someone who comes from a Warriors background right now. We know he likes a free-flowing, read and react offense, this type of system where everyone needs to be able to handle the ball and create plays is hopefully what I'm hoping to see come to the Cavs with Atkinson. And so someone like Tyson who can handle the ball, create shots, that seems like a natural fit there. So again, I wouldn't be mad if we ended up with Silva or Tyson, even though I waver back and forth on them. And another guy who I'm a little unsure about is Dalton Connect, a potential trade candidate. Have no faith that he will be there at 20. So this is absolutely a trade up thing. And I'm a little unsure about him because I do think his 3-point shooting will translate. His interior stuff, I'm not quite sure. And just to be honest, I have little faith in him being an NBA level defender. He is very upright to me. If he manages to break even on that side, or at least be someone who you can hide to a degree, then this is an easier fit for the Cavs. He's not someone who I personally would want to trade up for, but if they did, I would still consider him one of the lower risk prospects just because I feel pretty confident his 3-point shooting will translate. And if his other, like, he could be a 3-level scorer at the NBA level if he manages to get into the paint and finish the mid-range shots. But the 3-point shot, at the very least, I feel comfortable betting on. And with his size, that's an NBA level talent. So where do you stand on Connect?
I also do like Connect. Similar with Cody Williams, I wouldn't move the few remaining assets we have to go get him. But he's an NBA level scorer. Can score at all 3 levels on movement, standstill from all 3 levels. The finishing stuff, I do agree with you to an extent. Very right-hand dominant around the rim. And it's very powerful finishes, not too much craft. And when you move from college to the pros and you have to go into Wemby, you have to go into Jarrett Allen or Evan Mobley or Jaren Jackson Jr., does that same straight line drive, try and out hang them finish work? And it just doesn't, right? So the defense too, he's just not a good defender. His flips are so inflexible to me, and he's like a bull in a china shop coming around screens. He really has to figure that out at the next level to be an impactful player, like more of a 16-game player than an 82-game player. I don't think he has any issues at all playing in a regular season. He'll probably have a season where he averages 20 points a game, shoots 39% from 3, and looks awesome. But if you play him in the last 6 minutes of a playoff game, he's going to get hunted every single time. I think early you stick him on more power drivers. I think he can guard up because he is strong and has a good build. The switch stuff is going to get a little tricky if he doesn't become more flexible, but that's something you can work on, even though he is older in his basketball life. He's 24, I believe. So great offensive player. Don't know about the defense. If he fell, I don't think he'll fall past 10, but if he somehow fell to 12, 13, and there's an option and available trade up for him, I would consider it heavily.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of the definition in this draft, at least, of a high floor, low ceiling, because he has those concerns defensively that I'm not quite sure he's going to be able to overcome. Some questions offensively as far as the interior scoring, like I said, but that 3-point shot I feel very confident in. And again, if he slides even a little bit and the Cavs think they can get him at a reasonable price, I'd understand doing it. Moving into our next tier, this is the worth a shot category, and Jacoby Walter is a guy to me who kind of fits that. His off-ball prowess makes him someone worth taking a shot on, considering him. I do believe in his jump shot. The problem is the rest of his game is pretty raw and unpolished. I'm not sure how much better he can get in that regard. If he's available at 20, he's someone worth taking a chance on, but I believe you had him in you'll take a pass on him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's hear you talk about that.
Yeah, I hate to say this because I've heard great things about Jacoby, but out of all the guys we ranked, he is near the bottom for me for the specific Cavs team. Because what the Cavs need, he just doesn't do for me. He projects as a good movement shooter, but he didn't shoot it well at Baylor. I don't believe the on-ball stuff. I don't think the first step is very good. I don't think the handle's tight enough to warrant the creation reps that will help and aid his development. And I just don't know about the defense either. He has a good build. He has that kind of KCP, Gary Trent. I think he's Gary Trent. I think that's the closest player comp to me, where he's like 60th percent outcome. And I don't think the Cavs need a guy like that. You don't need to spend a first round pick on that to me, because if we're going to take a standstill shooter, I'll just take the 6'9" Australian guy. I know I don't love him either, but it's just a size profile thing for me, where this team we just need to get bigger. And if I have 2 guys of the same skill set, I'm just going to take the bigger guy, frankly. If I bought the on-ball stuff more, I'd be more in, but I just don't buy it at all.
Yeah, that's totally valid. And I mean, by the way that you described him, and I kind of agree here, it's like at that size and with that skill set, you'd almost feel comfortable just saying, hey, we have Sam Merrill already. We know he can shoot the lights out off the ball. Let's just try and get him more involved and draft someone else who fills a different need. I think would make a lot of sense there. Also, I moved past this a little faster than I wanted to. You have Baylor Shireman, Terrence Shannon Jr., and Cam Chris on your board. You want to talk about each three of those rapid fire, because I didn't have them on my board just because, as I said, I'm not an NBA draft expert. There's only so many prospects who I can catch up on in a month's time, month and a half. So fill me in on what you think about these three guys.
Sure. So with Baylor Shireman, I am more than ready to be hurt by the old lefty white college shooter. I'm more than ready. Baylor Shireman's just really good at basketball. A great, difficult shot maker. Let me pull up he shot 48.8% on unguarded catch and shoot jumpers this year. He's a sniper. Most of his stuff actually comes off of movement because he doesn't get just stand alone catch and shoot jumpers that much because he's so dynamic. He has more playmaking than I initially thought. He's really good at running a DHO. I could see him with Evan Mobley running it, and he can score in the mid-range too if need be. Give a little bump around the free throw line, hit a fadeaway. He's just a smart basketball player, and out of every wing from this tier down for us, he's the one I would take because I just don't see him failing. As long as he stays healthy, right? we've seen that one before. But I have a hard time seeing Baylor Shireman not being a top 25 guy in this class just because how smart he is. Going to Terrence Shannon Jr., totally different prospect, right? Equally as old, but just he shot out of a cannon at all times. I love the rim pressure from him. It's something this team, their bench unit, could really use, in my opinion. The only problem is he's just a score-first guy. He had a crazy usage for Illinois, and he averaged like 2.8 assists per game or something like that. So he's looking to score at all times. The jumper improved this past year. I believe he was around 36% from three, mostly off the bounce stuff. I don't know if I buy the three-point shot translating, and without it, how valuable can he make his athleticism? He's not super crafty around the rim. It's kind of the connect thing where it's just power, just straight up. If you need to watch him play UConn in the tournament where they didn't score for like 50 real-time minutes, and he's driving straight into Donovan Clingan for over a half and just getting nothing from it. And on the defense, he's an event defender, though. He makes stuff happen, and I think he could be a really impactful two-way wing on the right team. Just if the shot doesn't come along, I don't know what it looks like with us. So that's last year I was higher on him. I would love him in the second round, but at 20, it's a little risky for me. And then going to Cam Christie, I just think he's a better, little bit bigger version of Jacoby Walter and a little bit younger too. So that's why I like him. I have him ranked above Jacoby because he's a little bigger, a little younger. I like the shooting better and the athletic pop more. So that's why I have Cam Christie above Jacoby Walter in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for breaking that down. This is why I'm not an NBA draft guy. I'm bad at this stuff. This is why I had to have an expert help me out here. But rounding out my worth a shot category, because we already talked a little bit about Flip, is Dadier. Is that how you say it? Back home, Dadier.
Yeah.
He's someone who, you know what? I'll be honest with you. It wasn't until like a week or two ago that I even found out about this prospect. So again, not an NBA draft guy, but just from looking at him and a little bit that I was able to catch up on, honestly, you could convince me to put him in the swinging for upside tier. I only have him here because, one, I'm not as familiar with him, and I feel less confident in this swing as I would for the other prospects that I put in there. I think there's a greater risk. But again, definitely worth a shot. He's young and underdeveloped, but he has the length, the size, the offensive touch to be a fascinating prospect. I really think we overlook that natural feel for the game that some prospects show. When I watch him dribble, attack the rim, some of his more creative acrobatic finishes, some of those mid-range shots, his craftiness, I can just tell he oozes feel for the game. And that's really valuable to me when analyzing a prospect. So where did you have him in your tiers?
I had him in the swing
All the way,
prop side
yeah.
tier. Yep. I think he's worth that because I see the dribble pass shoot archetype most clearly with him, because all of his numbers were low volume in Germany this past year. He played, I think, 58 games between their regular season, a cup, and something else, and he logged like 900 minutes. So not a lot of playing time. He came in midway through the second quarter, and a lot of his stats came at the end of games when Ulm was up 15-20 because they were a pretty good team. And he got a lot of his counting stats at the end of games when they didn't matter so much. But his shooting profile is pretty impressive. He shot 38 and 39% respectively on guarded and unguarded catch and shoot jumpers, and 20 or 46% on dribble jumpers. So I buy the scoring profile for him. The touch is good. The mechanics need to be cleaned up. I think he could get a little wild with his body on his pull-up mechanics. There's some Jordan Poole flair to him where he has the wrist wrapped. He has some in his bag moments where some of them are late in clock, but he comes off a screen in their space. So he combos a little too much, does a weird pivot, and throws up not a good shot. I like the creativity, but you hope he reins that in a little bit. And the finishing stuff was really good. He was, I think, 74% at the rim.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and he finished, I think, 74% at the rim in the half court. Most of them came off cuts, but he's a smart cutter. Whether it was designed by Ulm or not, his recognition on when to cut and where to cut was impressive, and the multitude of cuts as well. It wasn't just navigating the baseline. It was 45 cuts from the top of the key, and he can get on the rim a little bit. He's not the craziest athlete in the world, but off 2 feet, he's pretty explosive. The defense isn't awesome either. I like him against wings, but that's kind of it. I think he gets lazy on ball a lot of times. He'll kind of get up in his stance, especially guarding ball screens, and he'll try and cheat the screen, allow a reject, and it's a layup. Stuff 18-year-olds do, so I'm giving him a little bit more grace there because he is young. I did like him against, like I said, against wings. He does need to get stronger. There are times where guys were able to go through his chest and finish over him because he's not super strong, even though he has a good frame, not super vertically inclined if he's not kind of in a straight line. And the wingspan isn't great. It's pretty much an even wingspan at 6'9", I believe. So he just doesn't have a lot of margin for error on defense, and that shows up in the low steal and block percentage for me. The block percentage was like under 1%, and the steal was under 2%. He just doesn't make stuff happen on defense, and off ball he's not awesome either. Doesn't navigate screens very well to me, and I think he got a little hot, especially guarding corners. He got too high up the line too frequently, and he loses man. And because he doesn't have those recovery skills, it puts him in a bad spot. Again, I don't know if it's Ulm's defensive, their tactics for corner guys to get up the line in the gap and deter drives, but he just didn't recover well enough to execute it. And I don't think he doesn't rebound that well right now either. And going back to the offense, one last thing is he's not a good passer, especially on drives. He's pretty much looking to score the full time. I like his swing passing and the crispness on him. It was pretty much the first thing I noticed about him is the velocity he gets on his passes, and I really like that. It's just when he's looking to score, that's all he's looking to do, and there's no manipulation on the defense at all. So I know I said a lot of negatives, but being an 18-year-old 6'8" in shoes wing scorer, that's a guy I'm willing to take a swing on if the organization wants to put the time into that and sees the potential that he has.
Yeah, I mean, based on your description, I see exactly why he would be someone that you would swing for upside on. Is he has those concerns, those gaps in his game, but because there's so much raw potential, and I mean, those in his bag moments, they're the stuff of dreams and nightmares. You see the potential when he can get cooking like that. It's really easy to talk yourself into it, but then you have to be real and acknowledge the flaws, and that's where you like I said, I could push him all the way up to that swinging for upside tier as well. He's a very intriguing prospect to me. I wish he was on my radar earlier in this process because then I would feel more confident assessing him. But that rounds out my worth the shot category. Now we're going to move into, I think we both had quite a lot of guys in our we will pass on them tier. We can start here. I'll go Johnny Furphy to start off. Let me pull him up real quick in my notes. This is someone who we talked about last time in our previous episode, which I recommend checking out if anyone's interested. Look, I appreciate his motor and his competitiveness. I think you combine that with his height and his shooting, and I feel comfortable saying that Furphy probably will end up being a useful NBA player somewhere. My concern is that I'm not sure if he will ever expand past being a back-end rotational player. And while, yes, that's a success for the 20th pick in the draft, I just don't know if the Cavs need to play it that safe. I don't need another Dean Wade. I would like them to aim a little higher with this pick. There are prospects who, in my opinion, the ones who I have listed ahead of him, they're talented enough to develop into legit rotational players. I'm talking 6th or even 7th man in your depth chart type of guys. And while I think Furphy could easily become the 9th man in your rotation, I just have less faith in him making that leap when compared to other prospects. And so basically what I'm saying is I don't hate him as a prospect. I just like the other players above him more, which is why I placed him in this tier. What's your reasoning for passing on Furphy?
A lot of the same stuff you said, Tony. I don't really see the upside with Furphy. I think why the Cavs reportedly like him and why I think they'll end up drafting him is he does stuff coaches love. He shoots it well, he plays hard, he rebounds, he cuts well. And that'll get you on the court for pretty much any team, no matter the level. But besides that stuff, maybe I'm harping too much on what he can't do. But seeing the struggles this team had in the postseason, we need more guys that can boogie without a ball screen. We need more juice. It's just perfect, and I just don't think he can do that. Like we talked about in the last episode, the shot profile is very limited. It's a lot of standstill stuff, a lot of corner stuff. We have guys that can do that already. And if he's not providing anything outside of that, sure, the cutting is fine and the defensive rebounding is fine. He averaged like 1.4 offensive rebounds a game, I think. So again, crashes the glass, plays hard, but he has to be a good defender. And I don't think he's going to be a good defender unless he gets a lot stronger or the feet move a lot faster. And I don't know if either is going to happen. So I just don't know where his value at 20 comes from for the Cavs. Again, I get it, but there are a lot of guys I'd rather take over him at this spot.
Yeah, that's basically where I'm at. I see why someone would want him, but there's just guys that I would rather have. If he is who we end up with, like I'll say out of my tier here for the ones that I'll pass on, it's probably Furphy and I would say Furphy, Ware, and Salon. Those would be my 3 who I feel the most comfortable moving up a tier if I had to. Maybe you can convince me on a couple other guys as we go through this. Moving to someone who I've been wanting to talk about is Keyshawn George. Is it Keyshawn or Kaishan?
I'm pretty sure it's Keyshawn.
Okay. So Keyshawn George, if it's Kaishan, I apologize. This is, this category really in itself is just loaded with the potential for freezing cold takes, but we're just having fun here. Why not get a little bold? And I know you have him in your worth the shot tier, so we're going to disagree here a little bit. I just don't really believe in George. I don't believe in his skills that much. I do think his shooting is legit. I think he can absolutely shoot the ball. honestly, he reminds me of Emoni Bates in a way where he's like a more polished Emoni Bates, where I have no doubt that he can strictly shoot the ball. I just don't have any faith in the rest of his game developing to a point where he can be a serious NBA player. And I promise that's not meant as a diss to Emoni. I'm rooting for both Emoni and George to prove me wrong, whether it's in Cleveland or somewhere else. I'm just keeping it real with how I see their games. I'll give George credit in saying I think he has a strong feel for the game. I think he has good court vision. He's made some passes that really impressed me. Again, I think he's more polished than Emoni at this stage. I don't want people to think that's a direct one-to-one comparison, but George, his athleticism or lack thereof is the biggest concern to me. And it's his ability to break a defender down off the dribble, his lack of a vertical pop, his finishing, even the attempts that he converts. They just look like he would be swallowed up by NBA level defenders. Now he's young, so maybe he will develop into something more. And with all that shooting upside, I get why he would be worth a shot. But I'm just out on George as a prospect personally. Where do you stand?
I'm a little higher on Keyshawn because of the offensive profile, the dribble, pass, shoot. I think he has a better handle and more playmaking chops than Furphy. The shot was better. And for this specific Cavs team, I'm more willing to take a bet on that. And the Emoni thing, I think he's older than Emoni by a little bit. Keyshawn, is going to be 21 this year, I believe. That's part of the reason why I'm a little lower on Keyshawn relative to, I think, everyone else in the Cavs sphere, because he's like an older freshman and just didn't really produce. With Dottie, I can excuse it. He's on a pro team at 18 years old. Keyshawn's a 20-year-old going on 21, put up like 7, 4, and 3 or something along those lines. Granted, that Miami team was a freaking disaster. Anytime it got to a guard's hands, it was a black hole. So I think Keyshawn could have put up more stats, but he just didn't. I mean, frankly, he just really didn't. And on the defense, I like I don't even know if I like the feet better. I like the body a little bit better. I think he's a little bit longer. He looks huge on the court. That's the first thing I noticed on film is he looks massive out there. And I think it could help him guard more positions than Furphy, even though he's a worse athlete than Furphy. But I think the floor for Keyshawn is lower because the athletic profile, not sure he could jump over a phone book. And I don't know. That's why I think he's worth a shot, because there's more upside to me with him, where if he hits, it's a dribble, pass, shoot, wing that can, in theory, guard a couple positions. And it's just a skill that the Cavs don't have. That's my biggest thing with this draft and kind of my rankings is if you can dribble, pass, and or shoot, 2 of those 3 things, I'm fairly in on you as long as the other stuff isn't horrible. So that's why I have Keyshawn in the worth a shot tier.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said there. And, in all honesty, we could have even added just an additional tier because for me, like, looking at the guys who I have in this I'll pass tier, the guys who I'm absolutely out on, I want nothing to do with, that would be Zach Edey, Yves Missi. I think I would put McCullough and Dunn in there as well. And then Collier. Is it Collier? I should know how to pronounce these people's names, but
honestly, I don't even know. I don't think I've ever gotten a clear enunciation of it.
Yeah. Well, those are the guys who I would have in my just like completely out on tier list. I can go kind of quick on a couple of these guys, and we do have to wrap up here, and we got a couple prospects to get to, so we'll go super rapid fire. But for McCullough, Dunn, and Missi, I'll make it really simple. Just it's the lack of shooting. I don't believe in any of their ability to space the floor. The Cavs straight up just don't need that at this point. And I know you don't want to draft strictly for fit, but I'm sorry. I'll pass on all these guys because I don't believe them as 3-point shooters. And I think that's something the Cavs just can't afford to do. The other player here, where is he? Hold on. I'm looking for Edey. Yeah, sorry. Just not doing it. At his best, he could be a drop big in the NBA, I think, but I don't see the use for that in Cleveland. I hope he makes it at the NBA level, but his archetype, he's kind of a dinosaur at this stage in basketball. It's just not needed for many NBA teams, especially not in Cleveland. I think it would be a mistake for the Cavs to be the team that takes a chance on him. And then I do also, I'll let you jump in here in a second, but I want to adjust or maybe amend my opinion on Salon a little bit as well, because probably should have him at least and worth a shot. I'm a little worried about his shooting upside is my concern. I don't have too much faith in that jump shot, and his lack of self-creation is the thing that's staggering to me, but the size and potential, it makes him worth considering. I probably should have him a tier higher, but where do you stand on the flurry of guys I just listed?
So with Salon, I put him in swing for upside because he's theoretical to me. If he can, if he can shoot, if he can't dribble at all. So if there's any dribbling thing going forward, that would be a plus. But he finished like 46% at the rim this past year. So being a true 6'9", muscular 18-year-old, he just doesn't know how to use his body yet. So if that stuff comes together, he's going to be an incredibly useful player, especially in a playoff setting, in my opinion. And he's already a good defender. So it's really the offense. It's the offensive stuff for a lot of these guys that we say we'll pass on. With Edey, again, I'm not really interested in a non-versatile big at this point. McCullough, it's the injuries for me. If we have nightmares about Windler, we'll never get over McCullough if we take him, because he's way more banged up than Windler ever was in college. I know Ryan Dunn has no offense at all, but if he gets it, he will be like a top 3. His defense is that good. I think he's a generational wing defender. So if there's any offense at all, he is incredibly valuable, but he's starting at 0 on offense. So that's why I put him in I'll pass. But just looking at that defense, the motor from him, it's just, I get it. I do. But just having no offense for a team that hasn't been able to score when it's mattered, it makes it hard to sell me on it.
Yeah, if the Cavs are in a different position, I would be able to buy into Dunn immediately, taking a chance on a guy like that, no question. But because of where the Cavs currently are, it's just not a gamble that I think that they realistically should be taking. I just don't know where you would be able to afford him the reps to even get him on the floor with this team, with the lack of offensive touch right now. Someone who I would also like to give some credit to is where I would like to toss him into that category of, you could convince me he's worth a shot. I think he has potential to be a floor spacer, although I wouldn't be surprised if he does, but I'm not really sold on that either. I do think he has solid mechanics, but the volume is super low. His free throw percentage is not very impressive. And much like I said, with a lot of these guys, I would just rather take a chance on the prospects ahead of him. But he is close to being in the worth a shot tier, as most of the people in this list.
Yeah, with Ware, it's kind of the same thing with Edey. Ware's strictly a 5, and I don't buy the outside shot coming along. So with this Cavs specific situation, it just doesn't make sense. He's never going to get on the floor. So it's just, unless you're going to trade Allen and you still want to pair Mobley with a 5 that has more of a potential to maybe shoot than Jarrett Allen, then I get it. But what are we doing if that's the goal the front office is going? So that's why I'll pass on Khalil Ware for the Cavs.
Yeah, he's a guy where if somehow all of these other prospects were off the board, then I guess, why not? But I don't foresee that being the case. And so I'm going to have to pass on him. I believe the last person who I haven't talked about is Clintman. Again, you could put him right in there with these other guys. It's why he's sharing a tier with them. I could talk myself into him. 6'10" wing. He has the promise to be a 3-point shooter, maybe some playmaking chops to develop. I think you could convince me to move him up a tier, but he's just not a guy who I'm super in love with. Where do you stand?
Yeah, I'm right there too. It's, again, an energy forward that doesn't really shoot it or pass or dribble it that well. In the open court, he looks great. Again, he's huge. He's a good athlete. He plays hard. But when that isn't there, I just don't know what he does for the Cavs on offense. Again, in a more conventional setting, maybe you can talk yourself into him more. But if he's sharing the floor with another center that doesn't shoot it, especially Jarrett Allen, I don't know where the value comes from.
Yeah, I agree. And hey, you know what? That's going to do it for this episode of the Junkyard Pod. Special thank you, James, for helping me break down all of these prospects. It really is the NBA draft is an exciting time. And I wish that I had more time to dive into these guys, but I think you helped, round out my edges here and help me a little bit describing these prospects. And so I really do appreciate it. And, special thanks to anyone who watched or listened to the show. If you enjoyed it, please consider hitting subscribe and dropping a like. And with all that being said, go Cavs.